Yeah.
Awesome. Head upstairs now.
Concentrate on the fine art.
See you later.
If you are going to do this a lot,
Yes.
get yourself a memory stick, put a virtual environment on it with all your tools in it, and carry that in your pocket too, just in case you can. Then you can just.
That sounds a very good level of preparedness that I should aim for.
But it's just. It's called learning through burning. But
Okay.
since I've already
so
burned,
I
I'll
need to
just
get
spread
the
this
command.
around.
So burning,
Like
so you
running
start
myself
off with
is on
burning
my
CDs
USB
instead
stick.
of the
I guess
That's why it's burning,
is
or
somewhere here. Oh, because we took out the USB stick is there.
I don't know.
Okay.
Don't show me here, so I mounted it. I put it over file.
You did?
TMP.
Could we open the text file that you mounted from the
Yes.
USB drive that you mounted?
Medusa.
Text file is which
It's called talk.md or something.
one?
Yeah, talk.md. Excellent. Yes, and
Väl att den är från Frankfurt.
hope you appreciate the level of technology we're combining here to give you an immersive experience. We've got at least 3 pieces of hardware so far working together. Four. Yeah, and this too, so that's 4.
Is there any other kind of fine art than SQL?
Do you have sudo access? Okay, I could recreate the command manually, but it would be quicker to copy and paste it.
Yes, but I think all guys are. Why?
Because you need to
No.
Could you email it to him?
Maybe can we copy them? We have just need to get a command from a text file, just like more text file where it's been mounted. That should work.
Du logged in as
Yes. But I cannot read files. Can I read these files?
computer is this one.
It's mine.
Can't you log in on your
Okay, so I can rebuild the command. It'll just take me like a couple minutes. So
No, but I mean, I cannot have access to the files.
Yeah, it's like a guest operating user name.
Yes, that's. I mean, then I
So
can-
while we're waiting, I can just give you some short points of information. Well, just one short point of information, mainly
Can't you
that
just log into your
next door to us is the
Instead
Dev
of
IY room, which is a room
I
hosted
mean, I can
by Debian, where if you want to have some sort of informal discussions, or if you want to hack something, or if you want to have collaborations or whatever, or discussions, panel debates, or if you want to give a talk, you feel like, yeah, I want to give a talk, but I don't want to give a lightning talk, I want to give something that's 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. You can sign up there and we'll try to help you promote it to the other sessions and steal their audience.
Does it have to be Debian related?
It doesn't have to be Debian related.
in my normal account.
It probably should be free software or free culture related. So go and say hi to these guys if you're interested.
Also, they have a really cute baby in there.
They also have a really cute.
They keep dropping by the root.
okay, so now open the talk box. Excellent. Copy this. Whole thing. Yeah. And then get placed in the terminal.
And in the interest of getting the introductions over quickly, welcome to the our Open Spaces team, as sort of loosely organized around the communities of open source free software. Our first speaker is Sam Tuke, so we'll talk about crowdfunding of these.
So I have a selection of fine art for you this morning, and some words about crowdfunding too, but seeing as often I've just used text before on the slides and they're not so interesting to look at, I thought I'd try and illustrate some things with fine art from a particular period. So I'm pretty glad it looks okay on this projector. The resolution's not so bad. Maybe the colour depth could be better, but we can work on that next time. So thanks for waiting while we got all the technical stuff set up. We have 2 machines now. I am Sam, and in case you don't know who I am, I have been working in free software and open source for 11 years. I'm a software engineer and a marketer now for free software. And yeah, I used to work for OwnCloud, wrote some apps for them. I used to work for the Free Software Foundation Europe, where I worked for 5 years, including doing campaign management. I've done crowdfunding in the last year for quite a few different projects, some small, some big. And I crowdfunded New PG last Christmas. I've crowdfunded for LibreOffice. I've crowdfunded for GIMP. I've crowdfunded for a platform called Open Initiative, which just crowdfunds free software projects. And yeah, so I have a little experience of crowdfunding open source, I think it's fair to say. And right now I'm doing marketing for LibreOffice and project managing some Disney apps. So that's me. And basically what I want to say in this talk is that I think crowdfunding still, I mean crowdfunding isn't so new now, but I think it still has enormous potential for free software. I think we haven't come close to realizing that potential. From my experience of doing crowdfunding with free software, I think it's actually pretty hard, and I think it's getting harder. But I think that we can overcome the problems, and I'm going to go through some of the problems that I see that I think we as a community need to look at pretty hard if we're not going to make similar mistakes that other projects have made before again. And I think it's worth solving these problems fast. So, yeah. First of all, what do we want? What do I want? Yeah. So lots of people want money. Or lots of people need money, maybe it's fair to say, like lots of free software projects need money, but specifically about what I want and what I want to achieve with crowdfunding, like why I became interested in it, or like there's going to be implicit goals or desires in some of the things I'm talking about, so I might as well try and make those explicit now. First of all, what I want from crowdfunding, I want the free software apps that I use to get better, because I use pretty much exclusively free software, and I have done for a while, and I would like to see improvements. I would like to see my pet project bugs solved. I would like to see a level of quality reached which I feel is really within grasp of some of my favorite projects, but we're not quite there yet. So I would like to see my personal user experience improve, and I think crowdfunding can help with that. I would also like, idealistically, for, you know, free software to have a better reputation, maybe let's say, for quality in the wider world. I'm talking mainly about user-land apps here, you know, like graphical user interface stuff. I would like to see a lot more people using free software, and I would like to see people comparing it more to, you know, more mainstream competitive things. Like, I wouldn't like, you know, I would like to see GNOME and Apple UIs compared, like honestly, a lot in conversation. I would like the freedom that I experience in free software to be more prevalent because we've got high quality apps, basically. And I want the potential of some of my favorite apps to be achieved in my lifetime, because I personally basically believe that it's inevitable that most software will be free at some point in future, but it's just a case of how long it's going to take, and I would like it to be like, you know, within 100 years, not endless cycles of humans like going through other ways of doing development and coming to the point later down the road that actually it's better to share. Because I think we can kind of already come to that conclusion. So, yeah, what do we do well as a community? Yeah, this is the utopian marketplace of high quality apps, I imagine, you know, if we funded it a bit better, if we had a bit better marketing, stuff like that. So, we do lots of things well already. As a community, as a, you know, yeah, and again I'm talking mainly about user-facing apps now, you know, like apps with graphical user interfaces. We do a lot of things well, and there are some things we don't do well. And I think, you know, first of all, I want to really recognize what we do so that I can then highlight what we're missing and therefore how we could fill in those gaps with crowdfunding. So we do engineering really well often. We have tons of expertise. We have no shortage of knowledge about how to do stuff. We have a lot of thought leaders in our fields, even with, you know, design and all sorts of other aspects. We have great collaboration tools. We have basically world-leading tools, and we've created some tools, you know, that have gone on to revolutionize other areas of industry. I'm thinking about, you know, real-time collaboration tools. I'm thinking about version control tools. I'm thinking about stuff that, yeah, that we've developed, you know, within free software to work in a distributed way, and that's something we do fantastically well. We're also really good at getting stuff out the door. You know, we actually deliver shit. We don't, you know, procrastinate for 3 years and then not have a release, because like people are more likely to dump something on a GitHub repository and people can use it even if it doesn't work very well. We have hundreds of thousands of free software apps out of there, and they're of varying quality, but they're out there. You know, we're really good at producing them. It's not the quantity, it's more, you know, the details of how those things work, in my view. That's the issue. We have tons of resources, actually. I mean, you mentioned money before, but I mean, we actually are very rich in other ways. We have bucket loads of enthusiasm, generally. I mean, in comparison to some of the other, you know, I get so turbocharged by working with communities of people who are working for free in comparison to some other large and small companies who are not working in free software. That's a very valuable resource because it motivates me and people, you know, like we're here because we have the choice to be here. Enthusiasm is a critical resource that we have in spades. We also have creativity for solving problems. And yeah, we come up with wacky solutions all the time. Again, people in free software companies and volunteers, we have no shortage of creativity. We have time, we have a lot of volunteers, we have Google Summer of Code students, we have, you know, we have people prepared to do stuff for free in their time, and we have a lot of infrastructure. Generally, it's not so hard to find free hosting if you've got an interesting project. That's not generally something that we're missing unless, you know, you're talking about scaling up hugely. So those are some of the things that I think we do really well. And here are some things I think that we're missing. So, yeah, we are often missing a level of polishing on user-facing apps, which, yeah, which is kind of sad. So as an example, as I mentioned a couple of times to people here already at this conference, I just moved my girlfriend to Linux last week. She asked me to help her do that. And she's Israeli. Oh, thank you. it took a long time. It's 10 months into the relationship. But I did that, and then what I found was that actually Hebrew support was really poor in a lot of apps. And she's a journalist, and she couldn't do her job, unfortunately, because none of the shortcuts were working in most of the apps that she was using. So she couldn't copy and paste the thing, she couldn't control A, she couldn't control Z. And then I was like, what the hell is this? You know, that must be something, that must be a configuration thing I've got wrong. I can't have added the right input. But no, it turns out it's just a whole set of bugs. There's like 500 comments on this one bug, or this family of bugs in the Unity issue tracker alone. And yeah, like, we have some bugs that affect lots of people that'd be really nice to solve. So polishing includes a whole lot of different stuff. Polishing is often really expensive. That's a good reason why a lot of, you know, volunteer-run apps don't do it so much. For instance, running something creating an experience that runs perfectly on one platform is, you know, it's very much more expensive to make sure it consistently runs perfectly on other platforms. But unfortunately, you know, Windows is kind of an important platform if we're talking about apps like Inkscape, or lots of other apps. Fred Brooks wrote a famous book called The Mythical Man Month in the 70s. He was an engineer, and he's kind of father of lots of ideas. And in that book, he talks about the difference between a computer program and a computer programming system and a computer programming product. And the difference between those and a computer program system product. And he says that basically each of those is 3 times as expensive to produce than the former. So a program is something that works pretty well. It does one thing, you know, it's like, you can think of it like a prototype, you know, it does what its creator designed it to do for them. A programming system is a collection of interacting programs, so maybe the back end has been split into libraries, and so they can be used independently, and they talk to each other in a clean way. It uses formats which are, you know, established, like maybe open standards, but just well-documented inputs and outputs. It's tested with other system components, so it's not, you know, it's not just tested with one stack, with one setup. Maybe it's tested on OpenBSD or whatever, as well as just Linux and Windows and so on. And that's 3 times as expensive as a program. And then he describes a programming product which is generalized across systems and inputs, which is well documented, and basically in our modern way of thinking is probably, yeah, like basically user tested in lots of different ways, and that's also 3 times expensive. So my point is that to get from something that maybe a developer considers to be working for them and doing what they imagined it should do, to something which is kind of useful or maybe even, dare I say, acceptable to people who are outside of our existing community, can be 9 times as expensive, according to FredBooks, like in terms of time to do that. And that's hard, because it's also a lot of non-fun stuff in many cases to do that polishing. And if I'm volunteering on my weekends to code things, which I do sometimes, I want to do the fun things, I want to go for the satisfaction, I want to go for the quick wins, I don't want to do all this testing. So with volunteer-run projects, often we have this problem with a lack of, for want of a better term, polishing. Other things that we tend to miss with a lot of projects I use is user engagement, like ways for the users of the software to either engage with each other or engage with the project in a way that they are comfortable with. And that's a key thing there, because having a bug tracker or having an IRC channel is great and it's really important and fantastically helpful, but that's not necessarily a way that, it's not necessarily a medium that people are comfortable using that will actually be using that. If 90% of people can never find their way to a bug tracker to report a problem, then I think that's a problem, because there's still a disconnect between between the users and the creators and where we want to be, or at least where I would like that app to be and where it is. So user engagement is something else we often miss. Consistency can be a problem, because again it costs money. There are tons of amazingly talented people out there who are doing great work and they're pretty efficient at it, and then they stop for one reason or another on a volunteer-led project. It might be because of money, it might be because their girlfriend got pregnant, or it might be because they got pregnant, it might be because they just burned out because they were doing tons of work and they weren't getting much support. But it's expensive to the project, and it's expensive to our experience if we're a user of that project, to let consistency sort of go unmonitored, to let, for want of some resources, for someone who's doing a good job to stop what they're doing. And I really see that all the time. I mean, it's great when we have a sudden spike in features and quality, but if it goes down again, we can't rely on the product, and it really limits it limits the wider audience that app could potentially have if we don't address the consistency issue. Focus is something that we often miss. When there's a company behind a product, then it's easier for there to be a consistent focus over time. But if we have a maintainer, we have different lead developers, if we have a meritocracy in a project, if we have people screaming for different bugs to be fixed and different features to be added, it can be difficult to have focus on delivering in a particular time frame one particular set of features and getting something running for one use case or one user group. Focus is something that's pretty hard to achieve without clear leadership, without somebody who, in divisive decisions, and we often have divisive decisions to make in free software projects, it's hard to consistently steer a project in that situation. And when that doesn't happen, we often suffer from a lack of focus, and shipping deadlines get missed, or stuff that was really important to its core user base sometimes doesn't end up in the app. And finally, marketing is, I'm in marketing now, not because I like marketing, but professionally I'm in marketing because I want to see more people use free software, and over time it has become obvious to me that it's important to market free software more, because a lot of people, there's very few people doing that, right? In comparison to all the other apps that, that I may think of us as competing against, we have very little marketing, and marketing is critical if we want. In many cases we have beautiful software that if only more people knew about it, they would probably be using. And the gap from here to there, for want of a better word, is marketing. So I think we often need marketing to just shout about the great features that we already have, the things we already do well, the awesome projects and potential that we have. And that also benefits us, because often, if there's a network effect, or it can affect email encryption, for example. The more people that use email encryption with GNU PG or OpenPGP keys, the better my experience of using email encryption is, because the easier it is for me to communicate with other people using encryption, and so it's in my interest to market that to other people so that I benefit, So yeah, stuff we don't do well, and money could solve a lot of these problems. Money is great for getting rid of stuff, like getting rid of issues that we don't want to address ourselves. So very often, you know, if we have opportunity to send someone to a conference to give a speech as an obvious example, money can solve that problem. Like somebody wants to go, somebody's able to go, it just takes some money to do it. If we need testing on a different platform, if we need a security audit, I don't know, something like that. There's all kinds of cases where money can help us take the great software that we have and like turbocharge it. So yeah, that's something that the free software projects very often lack. And the opportunity to reward people for the very real value that they're creating too. Money's important there. You know, we have a lot of people creating valuable things, and sometimes, like I'm reminded of KX Studio here. Hopefully you won't mind me talking about him, but like KX Studio, if you don't know, is a amazing Linux multimedia distribution. It's specifically for, you know, digital creativity production. I mean, I use it for audio production especially. It's great for that, but it also video production and stuff. It's great. There's tons of really original software on there that you can't get anywhere else. It's fantastic user experience. Like the value of that to me, but I think in a wider sense, is incredible. But the guy writing it, you know, he's looking for jobs in, like, he's looking for even, last time I spoke to him, he was looking for even non-software engineering jobs because his need for money was so bad. He was really considering working outside of software, the thing he's an expert on, just because, you know, he couldn't get enough monetary value for the software value he was creating for us. I think that's really sad. I don't want to see that. I want a solution when I see cases like that. So, yeah, I think crowdfunding can solve a lot of these problems. I think it can solve it uniquely well. And there are a couple of other solutions, though, that I think it's worth talking about. In the abstract of this talk, I mentioned, you know, there are other alternatives. You know, there are some new developments. There are some new funding models which have popped up in, I don't know, maybe the last 18 months, and you know, it's worth considering those before I really, you know, start talking about crowdfunding as the panacea, as the grand solution. So you can set up a company, you know, to add polishing and all this. You know, GNOME and Tuke and CyanogenMod and OwnCloud, they're all examples of free software projects that then founded companies to, you know, whatever, to provide a living, basically to allow the guys who develop it to make that product better. It's an option. You can sell binaries, like Ardour does. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically the source code is free, but if you want to get a simple, like, Tuke install for your Apple machine or whatever, then you have to pay every time you get a binary. That's another option. It's nice because the software is still free, but there is still income there for the project. You can be open core, that's one I don't like so much. MySQL's a bit like that. Magento is like that, so you have a core product and then you sell other stuff. Generally, in my experience, that results in a conflict of interest between the company and the users, because if the company gives something that is useful enough, then they won't be selling the extras that is actually their main source of income, so they tend to be pushed to take good functionality out of their core app and put it in paid add-ons. But yeah, it's an option. You can host your service like WordPress does. So yeah, generally that requires a company, because then there's usually a contract involved, and it's hard to do that if you're a community. But you know, it's another funding option. Yeah, WordPress, Colab, Jenkins, PHP List. These are all free software projects that, you know, rely on that as a model. You can give training and support as your source of income instead of crowdfunding. Yeah, the nice thing about that is it's distributed, so you don't need permission from anyone to do it necessarily. Floss Manuals does this quite successfully, for example. They have a French chapter which is basically self-organized. They give professional services around book sprints and documentation writing, and they can do that completely independently of the sort of core committee of Floss Manuals if they want, and get an income from it. Piwik also does this. They go around doing training in Berlin and stuff with web analytics. You can get grants. Yeah, sometimes it works. Can take a long time. It's you know, need some skills in grant application writing potentially. Also can take a long time to get nothing out in the end. You can just put a donate button on your site, and that works great for projects that are quite popular. A lot of really important apps never get visitors to their homepage because they're either not in the public eye enough to start with, or because what they do, they just do so well, so nobody has a reason to go to their homepage. Or you can work for free forever, which is what a lot of people do. You know, you can make that choice. I personally don't really want to do that, work for free forever, but yeah, it's an option when we're considering, should we crowdfund, should we not crowdfund? I could work for free forever. You could work for free forever. It's up to you. Okay. So, I think crowdfunding solves problems like the missing things that I was talking about earlier better than those other funding models that I just mentioned in most of the cases I'm talking about. I'm talking about mainly graphical user interface, based apps and user basic apps. So I think crowdfunding is really good for this. And yeah, let's first define what I mean by crowdfunding. I mean it's a promise that's made to a group of people in exchange for money. It's trust-based. So yeah, you have to realize that. Generally, you're giving money for something that doesn't exist, and you're giving it to this organization because you trust they will deliver at some point in future. If they don't, you have a problem, and we all have a problem. All crowdfunders have a problem when people don't deliver. Specific goods are promised. It's not generic. Generally, it's not like we will continue to be generally awesome in future if you give us $10. That could work, but that's generally not how crowdfunding works. It's usually very specific. You get these features in this time frame for this amount of money combined. There's a strict donation window, so after a month you can't donate anymore. If it fails, usually that's it. Sometimes people use flexible funding, but they tend not to perform so well as campaigns, and yeah, it's less common. Yeah, this is an interesting point. Usually the people running the campaign are legally liable to deliver. That's also something that's different. If you give a donation, then whoever you donate to isn't liable to deliver anything in return. Maybe there's a social contract to say thanks, but that's it. But if you're using Indiegogo or Kickstarter or any of the other mainstream platforms, they all have contracts which basically make you liable, even if you use flexible funding. So if you say, I want $1 million, but you use what's called flexible funding on Indiegogo, so you get $100 if you only get donated $100 in total, so if you get 1%, you're still liable to deliver 100% of the product. That's what the contract says. And usually people don't sue over this, but they could. And we'll probably see more litigation in future around failed crowdfunding campaigns. So yeah, there's a liability there. It's a good and a bad thing. Yeah, you can self-host. You don't have to use one of those platforms. I'm personally a big fan of self-hosting crowdfunding campaigns. And rewards are usually profit in exchange, so short-term rewards and long-term rewards. So that's just so we kind of have a mutual understanding of what we're talking about with crowdfunding, because as I say, it's diverging. There's lots of different models popping up. Question?
Would you consider Patreon a crowdfunding model?
Yes, it is one. Yes, it's a bit unorthodox, but yes.
You want to describe how that works, or?
Patreon?
I would rather leave that to the end. That's okay, because I'm not quite sure how the timing is going to be. This is an illustration of marketing. We're courting our users. Look at this. Yeah. Look at this beautiful thing we have.
Is that you?
No. How dare you?
I would say, which one is you?
That's me with the beard. Okay, so crowdfunding fits free software. It delivers particularly well the three core needs that I identified earlier, which are marketing, money, and focus. Yeah, it requires a very focused marketing campaign. That's what crowdfunding really is. I'm in marketing now because I was doing crowdfunding and I realized, aha, this is just a form of marketing. It's just a kind of high-pressure form of short-term marketing, but it is marketing. That's if you don't reach your financial target, what have you done? You've marketed. You've raised awareness to some degree. That's to me more of a definition of what crowdfunding is in one word than anything else. More than being about raising funds or about the money side. It's marketing. It's reaching an audience and asking. It's telling them that you're doing something. It's reaching them with a message and asking them for money in return. So it requires user engagement. I mean, you can not engage the public with a crowdfunding campaign, but you won't be very successful, right? You're going to be using social media probably. You're going to be probably using mailing lists. You're going to be using your existing network. You're going to be calling in favors. You're going to be trying to get on Reddit. You're going to be spreading the word. That's what a crowdfunding campaign usually involves. Even a small one. At the very least, it's going to be pitching to your existing community at the very least. And that's good, that's user engagement. And yeah, it does raise money, and an important aspect of it is that the funds which are targeted are set by the free software project itself. So it's the project saying we need this for these things. It's not some government body or some corporate sponsor saying we'll give you this much. Like I don't know either. Yeah, I mean yeah, the power is to the project to determine how much money they need. I think that's a really good thing. Yeah. So it's not passive as a form of communication. It's active. It's requiring free software projects to actively go out and spread the word. Not just putting something on their existing homepage or whatever. It's more proactive, which I also think is a very good thing. And it forces a definition of scope and time frame for features generally. So it forces a free software project to say what's most important. What do we think people want? To the extent that they will pay for it, how long will it take us to deliver it, and it forces them to answer those questions in a pretty, in a very serious way, because they may be liable at the end if they don't, deliver on time. I mean, as I said, it's a double-edged sword, this liability thing, but it does, I mean, from a user perspective, it requires a level of professionalism in exchange for the money that they're getting, and I think that can be a very, very good thing, because it's very focused. It forces these projects to have a focus which sometimes they've had in the past. Maybe you need to make executive decisions, like maybe there hasn't been an actual release of said app in 4 years, so no Linux distributions can package the app because everyone else is happy just using Git checkouts. This is a situation I've been in before, and just getting a version number is the only stumbling block to actually most people being able to use this app, because packaging requirements won't, Fedora or whatever, they won't accept something which is just a Git checkout in many cases. So it's a focus. It's like, okay, we have to solve this. We have no choice to ignore this anymore. We're asking for money, so we have to solve these issues. And I think that requirement of focus is a really good thing. Additionally, it's fast. Whether you succeed or fail, it's usually over in a few months, the campaign, so you know what the outcome's going to be. These are other benefits. It maintains the autonomy and independence of the project. There are no corporate middlemen in between. It's a guarantee to the user, which is very nice. So it's not, I mean, donations are very good in other ways too, but it's nice for a user to be able to say, when I give this money, I expect these specific things back in return. Not, maybe the project will see fit to spend my donation on something which is completely unrelated to how I use my app, or is even counterproductive to the way that I use my app. No, it's specific, so people can vote with their dollar, which I think is nice. Yeah, there is usually transparency of spending in a way that there often isn't when you fund projects in other ways. So most campaigns require a breakdown on the homepage of how the money is going to be spent, the overhead, and so on. Sometimes that can be surprising because the costs of running a campaign can actually be pretty high, but still it's transparent, which fits with our other principles, with free software, right? And it's repeatable. You can run multiple campaigns, even if one fails, you can crowdfund something else. Like it's not a finite resource, Maybe your reputation is a finite resource. If you fail enough times, then it's going to be hard to keep doing it and expect success. But
so far it hasn't blocked a lot of people.
It hasn't blocked a lot of people from trying again.
This is my 16th project and this one worked, It worked. It happens.
Awesome, okay. It's great we have an experienced crowdfunding here.
Not for me.
Okay. Okay.
But I have friends who are exactly in that position.
Okay, so I have like 10 minutes left, and yeah, that's not so much time. So now on to the problems section. This is Napoleon, by the way. You can't quite see how deep his frown is with this lighting, but it's pretty deep. So I have experienced a lot of problems with crowdfunding, free software projects. There are things I hope that other people can learn from. So yeah, a lot of the time apps don't want it. A lot of the time when I've approached free software projects that have lots of users and I think have a lot of potential to improve a bit for big wins, they're not interested so much, for whatever reason. You'd think if you say to a project, hey look, I'm going to take a lot of risk on your behalf, if I give you this bunch of money that I'm trying to raise, will you add this feature that your users want? You'd think they'd say yes. Often they say no. The first stumbling block. They say that for a lot of reasons. Maybe they're worried about the strain on their resources that popularity would bring, maybe they're worried that they have a lot more complaints, bug reports, support requests, and not, you know, beyond the initial funding, they're not going to have much other benefit. So maybe they'll be strained too much. Maybe they're worried that their focus, I mean, not maybe, I know these are all arguments people have, you know, shared with me, so, for not crowdfunding. Maybe they don't want to focus on end users so much. Maybe they have a nice graphical user interface, but it's kind of coincidental to their core aim, and they don't want, like, their project to be taken over by the graphical users, you know, like, maybe it doesn't fit their vision. Maybe they don't want to discourage more voluntary development. Maybe they're worried it'll upset the whole gift economy concept within their project. There's all kinds of, you know, historical nuanced arrangements and understandings, like unspoken agreements that exist within free software projects. And people sometimes fear, you know, there was a guy who wanted to crowdfund some features with Emacs, for example. He was saying, like, he was terrified of what his peers would say if he was asking for money. He, a lowly, recent newcomer to Emacs, in comparison to some of the very, you know, some of the more experienced, more talented developers on Emacs, like...
Particularly problematic project, but yeah.
Why? Yeah. So, some people feel uncomfortable asking for money when other people who are more qualified, who have been working for free for a long time, have never asked for money. You know, what right have I to ask for money to do this thing, even when it's something that would have a huge benefit to a lot of people to add, and the only way to add it might be to fund it. They would still not go through that process for fear of judgment by their peers in some cases. Yeah, begging for money. Nobody wants to seem to be begging for money. Some people just, when you say crowdfunding, all they hear is, oh no, like that's terrible. You know, I'm not gonna do that. I have a valuable app that my community has created. I'm not gonna go around begging. You know, I don't think it's a very helpful way to think about it, but some people see it that way. Yeah, and what happens if you fail? Of course, everyone's concerned about that, rightly so. The reputation of the project can be damaged. You know, there's all sorts of issues with risk. Also, the costs of a campaign are not negligible. You know, like just the cost of preparing a campaign for 1 or 2 months and then running it. Who's going to pay for that? You know, that's another reason to put projects off. And sometimes projects just aren't capable of doing these things. Like they don't have the level of professionalism to be able to guarantee something will be delivered in a set time frame. There's nobody within the project who's happy to take on that responsibility. Maybe they just don't have the time because it's, you know, they're working at whatever Intel or something, and they do this on the weekends. They can't create more time to work on it. Maybe we don't trust them enough to give them money. You know, maybe like their track record is really bad, or that the particular individuals we're dealing with, I don't know, we don't have a good relationship with whoever, you know, like I as a crowdfunder, I mean, I'm putting my reputation on the line too when I'm thinking about working with a project, because I need them to deliver. Otherwise, I've made a public promise to 1,000 people, or however many people donate, and then I don't deliver, and I need to trust the project. I need to trust the professionalism and the consistency of that project. It's also really hard to align developer and user expectations. Like, you have to be super specific, because people tend to be very verbal when they don't get exactly what they thought they were paying for in a campaign. And actually, like, with the best will in the world, making sure that expectations are aligned is really, really hard. You wouldn't believe the level of detail, you know, that you probably need to go into to avoid serious upset there with something as complicated as a user-facing application. Very often, it's very hazy, crowdfunding campaigns. People get upset. And sometimes, they just don't pay you, you know? Like, as a campaign manager, done a campaign that was successful, didn't get paid, you know? It happens. There's risks here that we have to deal with, like legally, and have contracts in place to protect us. So I've got 4 minutes left, and yeah, I just went through the problems. We do have some solutions, believe it or not. I think that they are surmountable, these problems. I think that they will take work from individuals and like marketing-minded communities as a whole to address some of these issues. Some of these are cultural issues, I think, but attitudes to money, what it's acceptable to ask for and expect. Yeah, some of them are just about the way that we work, again with contracts, for example, stating expectations and so on. But I think we need to be really responsible in how we treat people who are trying to fund. I think we need to be honest about the risks involved when we do crowdfunding, because there is often a lot of risk. Who takes what? You know, who takes what risk for what reward? I think that projects need to be open-minded about how they can best serve their users by looking for funds in more creative ways. So is it really in the best interest of a really popular like free software desktop app to not crowdfund and like leave all these things undone, leave critical bugs unsolved, leave like really important things unfixed? Like, are they really serving their users by not exploring a funding model like crowdfunding and leaving those problems in their app? I don't think so. Yeah, I think we need to get better at recognizing when a problem is worth raising money for. Like, so often I see issues which could be solved by a bit of money. Like, 2,000 euros could pay an expert to fix this bug that affects like tens of thousands of people in some cases, like literally. Let's learn to recognize those. Let's you know, like get good at seeing, okay, that's worth crowdfunding. Let's think about it at least. Let's not just say, oh, we can't do that. We don't have the resources for that. Like, it's really easy to do that, but I think we need to up our game a bit, you know, like, we can solve these problems. Projects can increase their expectations of the money they'd get in return, you know, like, Carl was yesterday talking about expectations that, you know, artists can have, and they can have unreal, you know, that they can afford to have greater expectations, potentially, of what they will receive if they just ask for help financially. I think that's true of crowdfunding too. Some of the brands that we have in free software are so powerful, actually. And there's a lot of people who would love to give money to new features, to a new release, to solving whatever problem it may be, if they just had the chance. Yeah, and how many? Like 2 minutes? Okay.
Me too.
Okay. So a greater respect for certain roles, I think, and a professionalization of those roles, like community manager in free software project. I think that's really important. It's easy for developers to really not value the role of a community manager, but it's critical. There aren't very many out there. I have a friend who's a community manager. She has a pretty hard time. Like, let's embrace the concept of, you know, community management and free software marketing, because they're actually really useful to us as users, because we get more of the features that we want in the end, probably, if we support these guys. Yeah. And in conclusion, I still think it's currently pretty hard to crowdfund over and over again, which is what I would like to do. I'd like to see it as a process which, you know, is growing and growing, and we see more projects doing this. I think it's pretty hard. I'm unsure exactly how we can get from where we are, which is still a lot of pitfalls, to it becoming, you know, an obvious sort of mainstream, an easy decision to make, let's say, for a free software project to crowdfund themselves. But I think it's totally worth doing. And I think we kind of need to, because I don't see any other funding model with the same potential as crowdfunding to directly reach users. And yeah, it just feels like this massive weight of potential on like pushing me down, and I want to push back, and I want to try and reach some of that potential with the help of the community and by like solving some of these problems together. So I have a list of questions, but I'm not going to have time to talk about them. So what's next?
So let's thank the speaker first. And before we open the floor for questions, since the session started a little bit late, I suppose we could go a little bit over time, but I have to tell you that this is, if you feel that you need to go because you need to go to another session, or if you feel that you need a cup of coffee, then please do go. Otherwise, we can probably take 5 minutes for questions for Sam.
Let's go straight to questions for the floor. Right. Like, I'm interested in what you guys have to say.
Right. Well, Stefan.
You didn't mention bounties.
Yeah.
So where it's kind of similar to crowdfunding, except that the person who wants the feature but doesn't want to develop it sort of proposes it, and then someone could say, I'm going to do that. And the contract is sort of like between those two people, and the community isn't really so much affected by the risk, because they will just eventually get a patch that they might commit or not. You know? How do you think, like, I mean, bounties has also been used a lot, and I've seen it. Like, is
there's
it
quite a lot of
not
precedence.
viable, or is there some other issue with it?
No, I didn't miss it out because I think it's not viable. I missed out mutualization as well, which is a really important way for businesses to fund. But bounties, yeah. I think there is a lot of risk there as well. The fact that it's one-to-one, okay, so the risk is only to a couple of people, but that's a lot of risk for them. I mean, we honestly like developers sue or burned out because they didn't know how to protect themselves when they went into a direct agreement with somebody who's, I don't know, more used to contracting people. Yeah, I think it can work really well. I think it's quite specific though, you know, like generally development is really expensive. You know, developing software is expensive, period. Free software is no exception. And putting on a bug tracker or on you know, one of these sites that specializes in bounties, just sort of putting a feature on there with a tag, like it's not going to get seen in most cases by enough people to raise several thousand euros, I would guess. But in the case of specific business needs, it can work really well if the businesses are actually looking at the places where the bounties are listed. So yeah, I think it has a lot of potential. I also think it has quite a lot of risks, but I guess it's just a bit different because it doesn't have the potential reach. You know, it doesn't have the marketing benefit, which I like a lot, and it tends to be, I see that working most for individuals or businesses who really have a problem that's critical to their you know, financially for them, and they're prepared to spend 5,000 up front.
Yeah, and the amount is usually fixed and fairly small compared to what people could cost.
Yeah, often it's a few hundred. I mean,
Yeah.
to be honest, most of the bounties I've seen, and I don't know, I'm probably looking in the wrong place, but a lot of them, they seem really way underbid, you know? Like $200 for, what the hell is that? It's just not realistic, and it's not something that a company, like a consulting company, would ever be into, because like it's not worth their time to put even the time into monitoring for $500 for something which would take them. I mean, that's not even a day's work for like a lot of consulting companies. So if we don't want to starve our developers and we want good quality outcome, then we need more, I would think. But it's, yeah, I think bounties are really interesting, and that's a good subject.
So I think Carl was first. If your question is very brief, we can take it. Otherwise, I suggest you take it informally while we sort of try to set up for the next speaker. So it's your question.
Later, it's fine.
Right. And I'm sorry about that as well. I'll have to close this session now. Thank you all for coming. Next up is Mozilla Sweden community here in this room.